Welcome to the Personal Pension Radio Podcast, where it's all about helping you complete your financial journey to retirement. Discover time-tested strategies and get unconventional insights into wealth building and retirement that actually work. Break away from the herd and go for the retirement you dream of. And now, here's your host, the income engineer, Kraig Strom.
All right, back on Personal Pension Radio. Really appreciate everybody, all the feedback, love the downloads, literally thousands of people a month downloading my little podcast, broadcasting live from the Personal Pension Radio workshop here in Redneck, Norco, California, joined actually on the line today by Dan Krzyzanowski in Austin, Texas. Hello, Dan.
Welcome. Hey there, Kraig. Great to be with you guys today.
That's awesome. I'm going to introduce Dan here in just a quick moment, but I've got to make sure to take care of my housekeeping stuff. Those who've listened to the podcast many times before, you know that I am the income engineer, really working on delivering that retirement dream that Wall Street always promised, but they only take care of half of it. Wall Street is great when it comes to saving for retirement, but really doesn't pull off the game when it comes to income planning in retirement. Hence, my title as the income engineer. I love that design and engineering around maximum lifestyle income in retirement. That's what I'm all about. And part of that is your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, your Roth IRAs, all of those IRAs and letters and such. And that's why I've got Dan on the call today. Now, before I jump into the interview with Dan, the usual disclosure alert, I am not an attorney. I am not a certified public accountant. I am a certified financial planner professional. And as cool as this microphone makes me sound, and as wonderful and nice things that Dan might say about me, hint, Dan, don't act on advice that you think you're hearing for yourself on this show. Don't act on things that you hear from financial entertainers like Dave Ramsey, for goodness sake. Meet with a qualified financial planner. Go over your specific situation first before you take action. We want you to take action, absolutely. But please meet with someone who is qualified to go over your specific situation before you jump in and start taking action on things that you think are great advice for you specifically. Now, with that said, it's been a while since I've done an interview on the show, and I really got excited about this because I got a number of questions that have come in from listeners, from clients, from just folks that I know in my professional circle about this world of self-directed IRAs. What in the world is a self-directed retirement account? And I love it. I personally have had a self-directed Roth 401k for a number of years, and it's been tremendously valuable in my investment career, if you will. Personally, I love it. Now, Dan Krzyzanowski and I met at a real estate conference, gosh, how many years? Several years ago now, and
yes, sir.
Dan is a total geek for self-directed IRAs and those types of things. We got to talking back and forth, and it really connected that with all the questions that have come in from the podcast and personal direction in my practice, I wanted to have Dan on the podcast to talk about this self-directed IRA world and what in the heck is going on with that. So Dan, now that I've given a little bit of background on, kind of my taste and beginnings in the self-directed space, tell us a little bit about where you are in the world right now, first of all. I'm always curious, geography-wise. And then how in the world did you get into this self-directed IRA space?
Yeah, well, Kraig, first of all, great to be speaking with you and the folks listening today. Currently sitting in Austin, Texas, via my wonderful hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Quick background on me, like a lot of folks, a lot of children of the 20th century here, pretty typical upbringing, very middle-class America, kind of traditional sort of basket of investments on the side. Really didn't think much about it. And, pushed through life, had a great undergrad experience at Wharton, MBA at Thunderbird with a little time at Merrill Lynch and General Electric. And,
no, Dan, just wanted to ask you a question. You're probably like me.
Sure.
You grew up with parents that generally came from the pension generation, right? I mean, these were parents who, if you work, you got a pension, right? That was back in the days when, 60, 70% of Americans had pensions, right?
It's wild to the point where my father, who just passed about 2 years ago, but, fun fact, he didn't even write his first resume till he was 60 years old.
Wow.
So it's pretty wild that, being that my grandfather was head of the local school board, to my dad and his best friend, he probably asked him to take out the garbage and then said, hey, do you want a job? And, half joking, but, that's the way it was in, the U.S. 1960s and, maybe to an extent now. But, from there, you're right. On the personal side, it was, go through your your 30 plus years, have a pension at the back end. My mom, bless her heart, amazing career as a social worker. Likewise, the pension was always set. So for that, generation and growing up in an area a bit more, I'd say, fiscally conservative like Scranton, PA, this kind of seemed to be the norm. And with that, it really took not even an undergrad at Oregon, because realize in the 2000s, things were still pretty steady Eddie, at least on the, on the financial side. So it took me to move into Austin, where we always keep it weird in the late 2000s to really,
That's right.
My antenna to come up and say, wow, it's amazing how, a house can only be $40,000 to be less than a mile from, the fun parties of 6th Street or the Capitol. I laugh as I look out the window knowing that teardown probably sold for $4 million or $400,000 and they're putting up an AB unit. But, so, with all that said, and, being kind of a newlywed without kids, it's always nice to have, half price drinks, half price restaurants. And, knowing of this, oddly, before all the Indiegogo and crowdfunding and all this good stuff came out, this is kind of how I slowly and consciously tiptoed into, the self-directed world.
Now, I appreciate that because it really is something that, for those of you who don't know, again, just to reiterate, what we're talking about is the ability for people to actually be able to manage, direct, and take care of their own retirement account. Now, we're not talking about necessarily your account at your employer, like a 401k at an current employer. We're talking about, let's say, a previous 401k at a previous job, being able to, instead of just rolling that over to a typical IRA at a brokerage firm, this is something where you can actually roll over an account. Is there, like an IRA, right, Dan, that you could just roll over an old 401k to something that would be in your personal control?
Yeah, you're spot on. And the number is actually huge. I just got back from New York City, and the number of IRA, so in layman's terms, call it your old 401k, or you may know it as termed as a rollover IRA. Collectively, this totals $10 trillion, which, is a wild number. I say it's the only number I know of that can go head to head with our national deficit.
That's right. $10 trillion is a number that most people cannot wrap their head around. And I've done that conversation on my podcast in the past, but let's just say it is a ginormous number. That's an official number that certified financial planners use. It's called ginormous. Yes,
I appreciate the term. And, the fun part, though, is when you think of this, this enormous pizza pie, less than 1% of those assets are in self-directed. And when you think about who really took advantage, it's guys like, Peter Thiel from FinTech fame. I think his first investment was actually in a Roth account in a little-known company called the Facebook. So needless to say, that did pretty well. And then, politics way aside, but Mitt Romney running for president, I think the Journal had an article, or the great joke on the stump was, hey, Mitt, I maxed out my Roth with $4,000. I heard yours is a little bit larger. And, Mitt's was, I think, a few more zeros to the tune of 102 million.
Wow.
And, yeah, it's pretty wild. And how did he do that? Not only the 4,000, but Mitt, being self-employed and being pretty sophisticated, he had some tools that he can actually contribute up to $50K a year. And, even with that, taking advantage of the Roth and a certain type of, class share where it said, we're going to pay the preferred dividend first, and then thereafter, wow, the sky's the limit. And, he hit it, and you wonder how some folks, or take your high net worth folks, you see how did they get there? This is some of the avenues and angles that they had. And, the real nice thing now is this is available in a very quick and easy way to all Americans.
And I appreciate that. And one of the things that I talk about here on the podcast all the time is that the tax code itself is literally a rule book, a playbook for how to pay less taxes. It's a guidebook for how to pay less taxes. If you understand and how to follow the guidebook, you can pay less taxes. And folks will hear stories like Mitt Romney and $100 million in a self-directed retirement account type thing, and they think, that could never happen to me. And I'm here to tell you folks that that's not true. I started my self-directed retirement account with a rollover 401k, a 401k account from a previous employer years and years ago, and was able to, through the connections with a friend. Now, keep this in mind. I want to highlight something here. I've been in the financial services world for 21 years. 21 years, okay? And I was trained by the Wall Street machine. The Wall Street machine controls the education of financial planners. I've talked about it many times. I did not know about a self-directed account. I learned, I forget how many years ago it has been. It's been a long time. But when I first learned the financial advising and investment management business, I was never taught about self-directed accounts. And you might ask why. So Dan, I think you'll like this. This is the answer. This is the answer I came up with on the fly one day when somebody asked me, why haven't I ever heard of that? And I said, because Wall Street has no financial incentive to teach me, a certified financial planner, how to teach you to take your money out of the Wall Street machine. There is no financial incentive for Wall Street to teach me how to teach you to take your money out. Right, Dan?
Yeah, you're 100% spot on.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest reasons I propose to everyone is I say the biggest reason that people haven't heard of self-directed accounts is the same reason that a lot of people haven't heard about cash value whole life insurance from their banker, because banks don't want you to know about it. And Wall Street doesn't really like self-directed accounts because it takes money out of Wall Street. So I actually learned about self-directed accounts through a personal friend of mine who had learned about it from an extremely wealthy friend of his. An extremely wealthy friend of his that was one of those Mitt Romney type folks with a self-directed account had told my friend, who's very successful himself, about self-directed accounts. And that's how I learned about self-directed accounts. It's the reason I really wanted to have this conversation with you, Dan, especially for the audience, is that the self-directed IRA account is something that gives us control to invest outside of the typical Wall Street, the conventional wisdom, if you will, right? So maybe you could kind of give me an idea. There was something that happened last year in Vegas. You had this great big event, and I remember reading about it. It had all these folks like, Shaquille O'Neal, and had the CEO from your company. I forget his name. You'll tell me, I'm sure. You'll remind me. What does it mean when they're talking about no taxes and this whole big, hubbub last year that I read about? Remind me of that.
Yeah, so, it's always funny when anybody's standing next to Shaq, but, Henry Yoshida is a great guy. And for reference, his last company was tangentially in the retirement space, like Goldman Sachs gobbled up about 18 months after it launched.
Gotcha.
So we're back at Money 2020, which is kind of the Super Bowl of the, fintech world. And, seeing Henry next to Shaq was, he's always crazy on stage. But, thereafter, we declared in very good faith, there's no taxes. And what we mean by this, and listen, anything, death and taxes, there always will be a piece, but to a certain extent, either if you defer for decades, particularly investing in things you want, or, on the flip side, a la Mitt Romney, when you pay taxes on the small seed on the back end, this huge evergreen tree, you're not going to pay on the back end. So what we're sharing to folks is that, because, when you invest in, say, a buddy's startup or, a real estate play out of your kind of normal checking account, there's going to be certain taxes that are going to, come into play. And when you net it out, TBD on how, from a net basis valuable the investment would be, whereas in a self-directed IRA or in a self-directed solo 401k, effectively you could literally be paying no taxes post-investment, or just have this, effective, very decades-long runway to grow without having to worry about paying taxes.
That's a piece that I'd like to expand on, right? Because I think some of the listeners will get a little lost in this, right? That here's what we're talking about. And I want to use myself as an example, and then you can kind of jump in on this with me, Dan, so that we talk about how this really, the mechanics of it, right? So in a very simple terms, I had a retirement account, a 401k at an old employer. I left that old employer. I rolled over that 401k to my personal individual retirement account at a major big name brokerage firm. Now, that big name brokerage firm allowed me to invest in typical Wall Street investments, and that's it. Nothing special, nothing unique. Okay. Now, fast forward, my friend says, have you ever heard of a self-directed retirement account? And I say, not really. Soon as I learned about it, I needed to have one. That was amazing. That I could invest in a variety of things outside of the conventional Wall Street machine. I created my self-directed 401k because I'm self-employed. I have a particular setup in the way that my work is that allowed me to set up a self-directed account. And then I moved my big name brokerage firm individual retirement account into my self-directed account. And I was able to invest in things like real estate flips. And a big one for me that I invested in that's been something that I personally like. It's not right for everyone. I invested in first trust deeds, the loans on properties where I get a nice, consistent cash flow for people that have money out on real estate, and I hold the title, if you will. I hold creditor protection because I get the real estate if they default on the loans. Now, in that respect, Dan, it's been a long time since I set up my account. Things are a lot easier nowadays, I think, to set up a self-directed account, right?
Yeah, it really is. So the nice thing, kind of keeping on par with just technology, how folks interact with signing up quickly on their phone, or, a certain experience on the browser for, signing up for anything, just from buying a product all the way through.
Yeah, we don't want to have to actually walk in the house or get out of the car. Yeah. We want to be able to do it on our phone in rush hour. No, don't do it in the car, folks.
No texting in the car, please no. No, but I mean, just from an overall experience, the main thing is that what I think people, you want to have the ability to invest in what you want when you want. I think it's a pretty fair and reasonable expectation as we're approaching the year 2020 here. So, broadly speaking, this is called checkbook control. So as it sounds is that, an individual should have control of his or her money, a la a checkbook, which, could mean an old school checkbook, but also think of ACH or wire.
Right.
So, for example, in the solo 401k, also known as an individual 401k, this is for folks that have self-employed income. So it could be also a husband-wife team should you not have W-2 employees. And a lot of benefits, what I'll talk about in a moment, but just from the checkbook control side, you're the manager of your own trust. As you mentioned, Kraig, you can roll over, say, your old 401k from a past job. And then also, a huge benefit is you can actually contribute over $50,000 a year into this account. So a married couple, kind of a husband-wife self-employed team, can contribute up to $100,000, which is kind of wild when you consider the IRA maximum is 6,000 this year. So
yeah, now we must clarify that this really is maybe unique to self-employed individuals, right? That entrepreneurial side of the world. But there's let's just say there's dozens of different ways that this could be set up to allow you to have similar kind of things available, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I think the way, and, of course, a slight plug here for Rocket Dollar, but, being that much like you, myself, the founding team, we have had these types of accounts. And in addition, I've raised millions of dollars by informing and empowering folks and educating them that this self-directed world exists. What we're doing also with the self-directed IRA is the checkbook control portion.
Right.
Historically, it has been this very, custodian just sounds like kind of a, like, as I say, a 20th century word.
Sounds like a jailer. Your custodian is a nice way to say the jailer, the person who controls the money.
It really is. And, I had to find a fax machine a few years back and, a scanner that works. I'd say probably getting, my passport renewed in a third world country would be quicker and easier. And I'm only half joking on that.
Right,
so,
right.
Our experience, and as I said, it's, at least for the consumer's perspective, it's all at 5 minutes to sign up online. It's personal information, credit cards, so to not eat into your balance, to e-sign a few documents.
Now that is a world apart from where I was even 10 years ago. I mean, with this, just scratching the surface back then. And folks, the idea that you can actually sign up for and basically have a self-directed retirement account online and ready to go using your iPhone or your Android phone in just minutes, that's really cool. I mean, that's, again, one of the things that drew me to the conversation with you, Dan, was just how modern this is and how, just technologically friendly it is and making it easy, because Wall Street would like no one to know about Rocket Dollar. Wall Street would love it if nobody knew about self-directed retirement accounts, and I want more people to know, because me, I am going to be bucking the trend when it comes to the Wall Street conventional wisdom all the time, and I love this conversation. I really do. When you say checkbook control, you also mean you have ACH and just kind of direct transfer control? Is it literally an old-style checkbook where you got to whip out a pen, or are there other ways to access funds?
Well, as much as I enjoyed the Saturday Night Live commercial a few weeks back on checks, which of course you could do, and I ceremoniously do it, as a joke for a friend every now and then. My buddy that flips houses, I'll do that for him for laughs. But no, I mean, it is the full ACH and wire, and especially from the ACH, if you are investing in something that's going to yield, like a typical real estate play that might yield a dividend. It makes it really, really easy just to set up that ACH, on day one.
Love that. Yeah, no, I personally appreciate it. Now, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit, and I want to touch on something that I think got a little bit steamrolled in our conversation before we finish up today, was this idea that there is this thing out there called a backdoor Roth. Folks, you've read about it. You might hear about it. You might see it in your Facebook feed as an advertisement. You might see it in your Google feed. There's a lot of companies that are advertising this backdoor Roth idea. And I have to tell you, the self-directed retirement account space is something that can really take advantage of this. And you'll hear stories out there of people who have used that backdoor Roth, that the ability to convert a big retirement account balance into a Roth balance. And just real quick, for those of you who don't know, a traditional individual retirement account, money has not been taxed. You put it in pre-tax, you take it out someday, and you pay tax on it. Money inside a Roth has already been taxed. Therefore, everything, including gains and growth and earnings and all of that, comes out tax-free. So I'm sure you see a lot of that backdoor Roth opportunity in the self-directed IRA space, right, Dan?
Yeah, it's something that comes up particularly with folks that have self-employed income. So, one thing particularly for anybody with, and by self-employed income, this is, a consultant, as we referenced before, husband, wife, teen, your true, you're doing side projects. Maybe you're on a Gerson Lehman, you're on an expert call. Otherwise you just do some side projects.
Right.
So,
a lot of folks have real estate licenses. They do real estate on the side and real estate investment.
It's extremely popular. And just, one thing that, I do feel compelled to mention is with these accounts, the solo 401k, to take advantage in the respective tax year of earnings, the account has to be open. So this is why, particularly in the fourth quarter, folks will open this account, say, in 2019, so they can take advantage of their 2019 earnings. So just kind of my little PSA for the day. Don't wait until January, because then you cannot take advantage of the prior year. So, with things like the back door, I'm actually just kind of to save time, because there's something I'd love to share in a quick 2-minute, but to inform that in our knowledge base, which is info.rocketdollar.com/learn, we really go into deep detail on pretty much everything we touched on today, and anybody's interest. Myself and my team, we took the first X thousand calls that came in, from real folks such as the listeners here today, and put together a very extensive knowledge base. But with that said, if I can just if I can just take the stage for a moment, the flip side of everybody here that has one of these accounts, of course, is the folks that are raising money, or maybe you yourself that say, hey, I have an idea for a side project, or I'd love to get a few friends together to buy a property or to invest in a fund. I'm going to be the one leading this, and I could benefit from, an angel round or a seed round. So as we term it, we say 6 figures in 6 minutes, and why we say that. And I'm going to go a little left brain here, but let's say you have an idea for a side project, or it's your startup company, and as I said, you need a few $100,000. And we've seen this hypothesis play out time and time again, is that all you have to do is inform your audience to say, hey, folks, did you know you can use your retirement dollars to invest in ABC? So, numerically, assuming, of course, you have a decent offering and your folks are engaged with you, if you send this out to 100 people, say an email, a majority of folks are going to open it because they're engaged and they like what you're doing. A lot of folks are going to learn, and some folks do like to learn in the privacy of their own house as opposed to in front of a big group. And then, the big benefit is you're probably going to get at least 10 folks that really consider this to say, I worked at a big company for all these years. I had $500,000 in an old IRA. I really like what you're doing, and it makes perfect sense for me to put in, 5, 10, 20% of this into, your company. So, you're probably going to get a few checks that way. And I think, the biggest joy, all jokes aside, but, I say if you have your folks and, your kids went to Penn, Harvard, or, who knows what you had to do about USC, but you're a little low on the liquid funds, whether it's, hey, first-time child, mortgage, a lot of kids in college, this is where you can really tap into your sliver of the $10 trillion, sign up in 5 minutes, e-sign a few things, have your checkbook, and then, you're really doing a true sort of value-add investment in your friend or in your community.
No, that's a great one, actually. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I personally have an example of this that I'm going to share here in just a moment. But just even recently, I actually have a friend of mine that I know that really, really wanted to invest in a particular franchise opportunity. And this particular franchise was not inexpensive, but it was not extraordinarily expensive. It wasn't like buying a McDonald's, for example, where you got to have, millions and millions of dollars. This franchise opportunity was there. He really felt strongly about it. He talked to a friend. That friend really loved it as well. And before they knew it, they were able to put it out, because my friend has a self-directed account. And before he knew it, he put it out into the world and started mentioning self-directed account, and had multiple additional friends and connections just by word of mouth in his network. And it looks like he's actually going to be able to get that franchise locked down. He's excited about that. And it really happened because he has retirement account money in a self-directed space that he can put to work instead of being stuck with the typical Wall Street basket of whatever, right? And then myself personally, Dan, I got to tell you, my very first self-directed retirement type investment was a piece of real estate that a friend of mine actually said, hey, we've got this piece of real estate. He's a realtor. He said, I know you have a self-directed account now, because it happened to be the guy who had taught me about self-directed accounts, right?
Yeah.
So perfect timing. And he says, I just so happen to have access to a real estate flip. So this is, buy a piece of real estate, fix it up just a little bit, and flip it for more money, right? That's the whole idea. You've seen the TV shows and all that stuff. Well, I got that phone call that says, if you'd like to participate, here's what we need. And we went through the numbers, we looked at the property, drove by, absolutely loved it, and I was able to literally write a check. Literally, checkbook 401k, I was literally able to write a check to the escrow and close on the property. And in less than 4 months, flipped it over and doubled my money and put it right back into my self-directed account. It was absolutely just as like, hey, I got to go do that again. Like, that was awesome. And there was no Wall Street investment that was ever going to do that for me. And all I had to do was, again, I had to be ready. I had the account ready, and I was able to take advantage of it. Really, just huge opportunity. And I've now been able to set up additional investments through the same account as those opportunities come up. So really love that. The question I wanted to touch on something with you, Dan, as we close up, right?
Okay.
Rocket Dollar is super easy to get to, right? Everybody's heard the name now on the show, Rocket Dollar, 15 different times. Just to make sure that everybody knows, if you missed anything or have any specific questions, you can always, as you know, email me. It's real easy, Kraig with a K at kraigstrom.com. Kraig with a K at kraigstrom.com. But Dan, maybe you have a better way, a simple way for folks to connect with you that you want to offer up for the audience, and kind of give me an idea of that. I don't want to miss it.
Sure, absolutely. So, of course, website, www.rocketdollar.com, one word. My email, similar, Dan, D-A-N, at rocketdollar.com. And, finally, just Kraig, I've enjoyed listening to your podcast and, appreciate the audience and community. So as a courtesy, for those who sign up, listeners of the podcast here, and enter code PPR19, PPR19.
Okay, personal pension radio. I like the abbreviation. Thank you for the tribute to the show, PPR19.
Yeah, so, for $100 off, to really join and, see what Rocket Dollar is all about.
Oh, that is fantastic. I super appreciate you taking the time with me. Again, folks, if you have any specific questions, if you want to hear more about this topic, you can definitely get in touch with Dan directly. You're also welcome to email me at kraig@kraigstrom.com. And you know that my New Year's resolutions are only a few. Right? My New Year's resolution, or the one that is consistently throughout all of my messaging, is to help people look beyond the typical Wall Street marketing message and realize there is so much more to financial planning and maximum income and retirement and your lifestyle than the typical Wall Street mantra of save, save, save. That's just not going to get you 100% there. My New Year's resolution is to make sure that you've got your personal investment and retirement income plan on track. If you haven't had your retirement income analysis done with me, send me that email, Kraig@kraigstrom.com, and I look forward to it. I absolutely love it. Don't forget, if you've heard something in this episode that got you excited, make sure you talk to somebody, a financial planner, an expert like Dan in the area, before you jump and take action. Folks, thank you again for listening to Personal Pension Radio. Dan, thanks again for being with me. And folks, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Personal Pension Radio podcast. We took notes for you, so if you missed any part of the show, you can find a full transcript of each episode at personalpensionradio.com. Be sure to download your free retirement income crisis report at personalpensionradio.com. While you're at it, we would appreciate some iTunes love. Please leave us a fantastic rating on iTunes by going to personalpensionradio.com/iTunes. Thanks again for listening. Now for the disclosure. Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended for solicitation, sale or purchase of any security or financial product. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and your tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed here. The term personal pension refers to a marketing name designed to educate future retirees and retirees about the economic principles behind creating their own pension-like income. The term personal pension is not intended to be confused with a defined benefit pension plan offered by an employer or by a government entity.